December 2025, arrives quietly, and you sense something beneath the calm, like a man smiling politely while bleeding internally. You hear confident voices on every corner, but their words feel rehearsed, as if they are reciting comfort to hide their own fear. The numbers whisper a different story, stacking silently, like unpaid bills hidden in a locked drawer. You have seen this posture before, the stiff confidence that appears right before a long fall. The market stands tall, chest out, pretending strength while its legs tremble from exhaustion. Years of easy victories have dulled its instincts, replacing caution with arrogance and hunger. Debt clings to it like wet clothing, heavy, cold, and impossible to ignore once movement begins. Every step forward now requires more effort, more borrowing, more pretending that tomorrow will fix today. You notice how applause grows louder as foundations crack, as if noise alone can stop gravity. The system reassures itself with memories of past escapes, forgetting that luck is not a strategy. Time tightens around it, unseen but relentless, like a noose woven from promises and leverage. Behind polished speeches, strain shows in the eyes, the look of something trapped by its own excess. You realize collapse never announces itself loudly. It begins as denial stretched too far. The market keeps smiling, borrowing hours from the future to survive another day. Pressure builds slowly, patiently, indifferent to confidence or belief. The first cracks will look small, almost harmless, easy to dismiss with practiced optimism. But weight does not disappear. It transfers, sinking deeper into weaker ground. You feel the moment approaching, when motion becomes unstoppable, when balance can no longer be corrected. What breaks it is not violence or chaos, but the quiet arithmetic of too much owed. You stand watching, knowing the fall is close, and preparation is the only remaining choice. You remember how confidence once felt earned, built slowly, before shortcuts replaced discipline and speed became mistaken for strength. The market learned to survive by borrowing tomorrow, mistaking delay for victory, and calling escape a permanent solution. Each rescue rewrote its memory, teaching it that consequences could always be deferred. What once required restraint now demanded indulgence, and caution was mocked as weakness. You watch habits form, the dangerous kind, where survival depends on repeating the same excess. Beneath the surface, obligations pile up quietly, patient and unforgiving. Interest compounds like resentment, invisible at first, then impossible to ignore. The system begins working not to grow, but merely to maintain appearances. Productivity slows, yet expectations rise, creating a widening gap filled only by borrowed time. You sense fatigue in every movement, the exhaustion of something carrying more than it can bear. Those in charge speak louder now, confusing volume with authority. Their reassurances feel brittle, like glass stretched thin over pressure. You notice how truth becomes inconvenient when survival depends on belief. Warning signs are reframed as anomalies, dismissed as pessimism or ignorance. The market avoids mirrors, afraid of recognizing what it has become. It no longer asks whether growth is real, only whether it can be sustained one more season. Debt becomes the bloodstream, circulating just fast enough to prevent collapse. But circulation is not health, and motion alone cannot heal decay. You feel the rhythm change, subtle but unmistakable, like a heartbeat skipping. This is how control slips away, not suddenly, but through repetition and denial. You see how comfort becomes dependency, and dependency quietly reshapes decisions once guided by restraint. The market no longer chooses freely. It reacts, bound by promises made to survive yesterday. Every obligation narrows its path, turning flexibility into illusion. What was once optional becomes mandatory, and choice evaporates under pressure. You feel how risk concentrates, flowing toward the weakest joints in the structure. Confidence masks fragility, but strain always reveals itself eventually. Small failures appear at the edges, easy to ignore when the center still shines. Repairs become constant, frantic, and increasingly cosmetic. The surface holds, but the weight underneath grows heavier by the day. You recognize this moment as the point of no return, though few are willing to say it aloud. The system doubles down, mistaking commitment for courage. Every promise requires another promise behind it, stacking faith upon faith. Balance is maintained only by motion, like a bicycle that cannot afford to stop. But speed introduces instability, and errors multiply faster than they can be corrected. You notice silence where accountability should be. Responsibility disperses, leaving no one fully in control. When pressure peaks, blame will scatter instead of absorb the shock. The market continues forward, not because it is strong, but because stopping feels fatal. Collapse now becomes a matter of timing, not possibility. You understand that survival depends on stepping aside before momentum turns violent. You notice how warnings grow sharper, yet fewer people are willing to listen as comfort becomes more precious than truth. The market surrounds itself with reassurance, insulating fear beneath layers of optimistic language. Reality presses harder now, testing every joint and seam that was hastily reinforced. Stress migrates quietly, slipping from headlines into balance sheets and sleepless nights. You sense impatience everywhere, the hunger for continuation overriding the need for correction. Each delay deepens dependence, tightening the knot that cannot be untied gently. The system starts feeding on itself, recycling promises to cover earlier promises. Growth becomes a performance, staged carefully to maintain belief. Beneath the stage, supports creak under weight they were never meant to carry. You understand that confidence now requires constant maintenance, like a wound that refuses to heal. Silence spreads where debate once lived, replaced by nods and rehearsed agreement. Dissent feels dangerous, not because it is wrong, but because it threatens stability. Fragile balance is mistaken for strength and stillness for safety. The margin for error shrinks until even small missteps become fatal. You watch patience erode, replaced by urgency masked as decisiveness. Every solution now introduces new problems deferred into the future. The present is mortgaged completely, leaving nothing untouched. Pressure no longer rises in waves, it settles, constant and crushing. You feel the air grow thin, as if oxygen itself has become leveraged. Collapse is no longer a question of if, but how quietly it will begin. You notice how hope transforms into habit, repeated not because it works, but because stopping would force reflection. The market clings to routine, mistaking familiarity for safety as conditions quietly deteriorate. Every day looks normal, yet the effort required to maintain that normality grows heavier. You sense the weight shifting inward, compressing what once moved freely. Confidence becomes ritual, repeated words replacing genuine belief. Behind closed doors, calculations replace optimism, and silence replaces celebration. The system survives by narrowing its focus, ignoring anything beyond the next step. Long-term vision fades, sacrificed to immediate survival. You feel the cost of postponement accumulating, unseen but compounding. Stability now depends on perfect timing, an impossible requirement. Minor disruptions feel larger, magnified by underlying tension. The margin for recovery thins with every borrowed moment. You recognize how adaptability has been traded for rigidity. The structure stiffens, unable to bend without breaking. Motion continues, but it is no longer graceful. It is desperate. The system begins consuming its reserves, mistaking emergency measures for strategy. You sense trust eroding, not explosively, but grain by grain. When belief weakens, even strong foundations tremble. The fall will not feel sudden to those paying attention. It will feel overdue, like gravity finally reclaiming what was suspended too long. You sense impatience turning into urgency, the quiet understanding that time is no longer an ally. The market begins reacting instead of planning, movement driven by fear rather than intention. Each adjustment comes faster now, rougher, leaving less room for error. What once felt controlled starts to feel reactive, like steering on ice. You notice how confidence cracks first at the edges, far from the spotlight. Small failures ripple outward, touching systems once thought isolated. Interdependence tightens, binding everything together for better or worse. When one piece strains, the tension spreads everywhere. The illusion of independence dissolves under shared weight. You feel the structure hum, vibrating with accumulated stress. Every safeguard now depends on another safeguard behind it. Redundancy becomes fragility when everything leans on the same support. The system loses its margin of surprise, exposed and predictable. Those watching closely stop asking if trouble will come and start asking where. The pace accelerates, not from growth, but from instability. You sense momentum pulling harder, demanding constant correction. Control narrows to moments, then seconds. Eventually, reaction replaces decision entirely. At this stage, strength is no longer measured by expansion, but endurance. You understand endurance has limits, and those limits are close. You realize the system is no longer advancing, only resisting collapse one strained moment at a time. Effort replaces progress, and motion becomes a form of denial. Every gain feels temporary now, borrowed from stability, not yet lost. You sense fear hiding beneath optimism, carefully dressed to look convincing. The structure creaks louder, though few admit hearing it. Fragility becomes normalized, treated as the cost of staying upright. Emergency measures turn routine, losing their power to shock. What was once unthinkable becomes expected. You watch faith thin as repetition replaces surprise. When reassurance fails, distraction takes its place. Attention shifts away from foundations toward surface movement. The crowd follows motion, not meaning. Depth is sacrificed for speed, understanding for reaction. You feel history pressing closer, familiar and unforgiving. The past is no longer distant. It is instructive. Patterns emerge clearly once denial weakens. The market mirrors its predecessors, confident until the moment it isn't. You understand now that collapse is not a singular event, but a process already underway. What remains uncertain is who steps aside and who stays exposed. The difference will be decided quietly, long before the noise begins. You stand at the edge of awareness, knowing preparation happens long before panic ever announces itself. Those who wait for certainty will find it only after choices disappear. The market will not warn loudly when it finally gives way. It will fail politely during ordinary days, while confidence still speaks fluently. You recognize how history favors those who move early and quietly. Survival is not about speed in the collapse, but distance from it. The crowd will rush toward exits that no longer exist. Blame will spread faster than understanding. Loss will feel sudden only to those who ignored the signs. For the prepared, it will feel expected. You realize wealth is preserved not by prediction, but by positioning. Stepping aside now feels uncomfortable, even lonely. But isolation is temporary. Regret lasts longer. When prices finally fall, they will fall far enough to rewrite lives. Opportunity will rise from wreckage, indifferent to fairness. The patient will move while others freeze. The cycle will reset, as it always does. Few will admit they were warned. You will remember this moment as the turning point. Preparation ends here. Action begins now.